Valkyrie is an incredibly fun, mobile and tactical legend lording over the skies in Apex Legends, with frequent untold access to the verticality of advantageous platforms, granting her great escape tools as well as the ability to be aggressive at a moment's notice. Her passive is an action-packed jetpack, which is activated by pressing jump whilst in the air, allowing you to reach high ground quickly and efficiently, only being tied to an auto-replenishing fuel resource as opposed to a cooldown. It means traversing floors or rooftops to chase or reset fights are easily carried out. Because of jetpack, the terrain can be looked at in an extremely different manner to other champions, to the sheer options she has above them, hovering across rooftops that are too far to jump, or between various floors as just a few examples. In addition, she has her own unique HUD, which activates when she's skydiving, either while dropping at the start of a match, from a balloon, her ultimate, or any of the other map features that allow her to do so. This HUD grants her the ability to mark enemies within a 250 meter range that are within line of sight, seeing exactly where enemies are dropping or have already dropped to take them out or bail to a safer area. For her tactical, you can press and hold the tactical button to send out 12 missiles to a targeted location when you release it, damaging and briefly stunning enemies that are hit. Based on trajectory, it can hit enemies out in the open, behind cover, at or from height. And finally, her ultimate lets her and any of her squad members launch high up into the air and skydive to a new location. By pressing the ultimate button, she goes into a setup animation where your squad can choose to attach on before you press the fire button to launch into the air. So that's the overview, but now we get into the useful details about her kit, how best to use Valkyrie and all the movement options she brings to the table, and then how to play against her. First off, I'll mention Valk is a recon legend, so she can make use of beacons to scan the location of the next circle. As a legend who has unhindered access to high ground, she can get to beacons easily, as well as scout ahead and rotate the team through her ult to the next circle incredibly efficiently. So there's a lot to unpack when it comes to using Valkyrie's abilities. Let's start with some details about her skydiving HUD, as you can find some useful info on whether marked enemies are the champion with the CH label or kill leader with a KL. Note that enemy players aren't notified of being marked, however your teammates will have all this useful information on their interfaces too. The jetpack passive also has a lot of nuance that isn't initially obvious to new players. Firstly, take a look at this setting in settings and then gameplay. By default, the jetpack is set to toggle, so when you press jump in the air, you keep burning fuel until you press it again. I'd recommend switching this to hold, as it's more intuitive to only hold the jetpack in those quick moments you need to, with its usage normally being only bursts at a time anyway, making it more cumbersome if you always have to activate and deactivate it separately. In a general sense, you'll want to be jetpacking for prolonged lengths of time as little as possible. From an audio perspective, it makes it very obvious where you're jetpacking to people that aren't in line of sight. And for those that can see you, you become an easy to track, steady moving target to beam down. When approaching ledges or rooftops using the jetpack, you might want to consider not landing directly on top, but going for the edge itself. It's infinitely safer as you're a smaller target behind obstacles for longer, reduces the delay from getting your gun out once you're in the open, and saves on fuel for your next possible move. Tapping the jetpack comes with a 1-second animation delay afterwards, so factor that into your decision making and approach ledges to avoid this issue. Staggering your use of the jetpack will allow you to brake and redirect your current trajectory for really effective evasive maneuvers, making the ability great for stalling out fights or retreating. This includes using it when falling to negate that brief sort of stun you get when falling long distances. It's useful to keep an eye on fuel consumption and manage the resource depending on your expectation of the forthcoming battle. You only start to refuel after 8 seconds of not using it, so as you get lower, it becomes more beneficial to leave it as long as you can to recuperate. From empty, it will take 10 seconds to completely refuel. Valkyrie's tactical sends out 12 missiles that deal 25 damage per unique enemy hit, and a further 3 damage per additional missile hit. The impact will also stun them, drastically reducing their ability to look around and move. You hold the button down, where your natural aim guides the missile in the middle of the first row closest to you, but a full grid will be displayed to aim with anyway. If you find you've pressed the button down but no longer need to use it, your only real options to cancel its activation is jetpacking out of it, or if the conditions are right, you can ult out of it too. You need immediate vertical clearance to actually use the ability. However, the rockets themselves don't require too much height, so in some more compact areas, crouching will give you the room to get the ability off with no issues. Just note that you can hit yourself through missile collision into nearby walls, so giving yourself that initial moment to shoot in open space will be beneficial. The timing is something you'll need to get a feel for over time. You often won't find times where you damage yourself unless you're up against a wall or something, but it's best to learn scenarios where you aren't wasting missiles due to collision regardless. To aid her already great escape tools, Valk can fire her tactical backwards while on the run by jumping or sliding into the air and looking down while firing them to slow chasing enemies without having to turn. Along with this, the tactical has use in many different scenarios. It can be used on enemies behind cover, at high ground, from high ground, or even at enemies out in the open to follow up with an aggressive push while they're stunned. So it's really versatile in its use cases. It does also destroy doors when you can get them to collide, but I found it's pretty hit and miss getting it to work.
They've done studies, 60% of the time it works every time.
Finally, her ultimate, which launches her and her allies into the sky, comes with a few notable mechanics too. Much like the tactical, you must have vertical clearance, and you'll want to make sure you're reasonably safe before getting into the setup animation. This animation is required and takes 2 seconds before allowing you to hit fire and enter the launch animation. During this setup time, allies can press interact onto you to join the launch. However, merely getting shot by a single bullet will be enough to cancel the ult, which returns the cooldown to 75%, which will require 45 seconds to be used again. This includes if you cancel the ult yourself using your ultimate ability keybind again. Dropping a heat shield in advance if you're outside the circle is also a great way to reduce the impact of the charge time to the team. Also, heat shields are cylindrical, not spherical, so if you drop one from height, you can get more value from it during the takeoff. Despite launching completely out of cover, you go pretty high, about 135 meters, and travel pretty far, so are unlikely to get shot down unless you fly directly towards a team. The cooldown is 3 minutes long, so shouldn't be used just to lazily rotate, as using it essentially signal flares to enemy teams your location, so it should be saved for moments where that speed and mobility is a current necessity. Firstly, because it will save your team from situations you would otherwise have been wiped out, but also because rotating on foot is a stealthier way to navigate the map. Due to the insane value of vacating your entire team in a pinch, consider saving a slot for an ulti accelerator so you're more likely to have your ult ready when you need it. Before I get into how to actually play with Valkyrie's full kit, if you're finding this video helpful, help me take the channel full time by subscribing and liking. I really appreciate it, cheers. So let's put all this together to understand how to play Valkyrie as effectively as possible. One of her biggest advantages is vertical mobility, so making the most of this should always be on your mind. There are ways to escape and chase enemies that other legends just can't do, or for those that can only really do it once on a lengthy cooldown. If you manage your fuel resource carefully, the floor above or below is always an option. When you need to create space, dropping a floor only to retake it once they drop is a great way to do this, allowing you the time to heal or isolate enemy players for a better chance of downing them one at a time. When playing this way, it's important to note the legends you're currently up against, because if they lack mobility, a quick guide to a roof is all it takes to completely safeguard yourself for the time being. You should also mix in the fact that you can approach teams from unexpected angles, firing through gaps attached to a ledge that you can jetpack to, for example. As amazing as Valk's overall mobility is, she's a pretty noisy legend on the battlefield. So in general, don't let the jetpack or ult be replacements for movements that could otherwise be completed through normal means, or I guarantee more times than not, there'll be someone waiting for you behind the next door. In some scenarios where your team are already in a good spot, you can consider using your ult with your skydiving HUD to scope out the location of the remaining teams, especially if you're lacking enemy team information on one of the final circles, and then just landing back where your team are holding up, as it's still a relatively safe action to take other than giving your position away, and might improve your chances to reach a higher placement. Note that you can hold the free look button down to look around without altering your full trajectory. As she's a versatile legend, I wouldn't use a loadout that specializes in just short or long range, unless it's your preferred playstyle, opting more for that mid-long range option along with a close range secondary. So what do we need to consider when playing against Valkyrie? So to me, her biggest weakness is the noise levels of her kit. There are ways to play her well and reduce this, but if there's a Valk around and you're about to throw hands, you'll hear her coming. When this happens, you must consider that you can be shot from more possible angles, as Valk can quickly jetpack to window ledges and other vantage points where you wouldn't necessarily expect someone to be. The stun window for Valk's tactical is probably a little weaker than an arc star, so if it's used on you from far away, I wouldn't necessarily pull away from cover to avoid it. What you can do is precast a cell or bat if you're able to recover the 25 damage quickly and resume the exchange where they wouldn't have the time to push you. And lastly, if you spot a Valk team trying to make a dash from the fight with her ultimate, note that the charge up at the start leaves them incredibly vulnerable to taking free shots, as they're very slow moving, and despite being tricky to catch in the sky, if you believe in yourself enough, you might just pull it off. As Valk is such a well-rounded legend, she's comfortable in pretty much any composition. The only things I would note is taking Gibraltar will provide the team with a guaranteed Valk ult escape inside his dome. Horizon ult, which is often an all-in strategy of pulling a team into one spot and spamming it with grenades, pairs incredibly well with hitting Valk's missiles. And finally, Seer to maximize on that recon presence. The pairing is incredibly popular in pro play, offering great team awareness of enemy squads that suits Valkyrie's ability to quickly engage on teams or reposition the team when required. Once you've learned the ins and outs for Valkyrie and you can play her comfortably in ranked, I'd suggest you take a look at some of the highest level players who use her often. The most notable ones for me have been Verhulst and JQ, both pro level Valk mains whose strats and mechanics are way beyond the scope of this video, which is more to get you completely clued up on Valk from scratch, so check them out below if you wish. But before you head over there, if you like this video and want to see more in the future, hit subscribe so you can catch me on the next one. Valkyrie is the jack of all trades that also excels in ways that there are no comparable alternatives to, which means she's a guaranteed pick if vertical mobility or map-wide team rotations are required. For what seems a simple kit, there's loads to learn, but just remember, we play for fun, so if it stresses you too much, cool off, touch grass, and when you play to win.